What if I told you that, in the Middle Ages, one of the greatest risks to your health wasn't charging into battle with sword and shield, but simply answering nature's call? That's right. History isn't all about crowns, castles, and epic wars. It's also about bottoms, bacteria, and an overwhelming bouquet of truly awful smells. Forget your perfumed toilet paper rolls and your shiny chrome flush handles. Picture yourself deep inside a freezing stone fortress, the walls dripping with damp, or out in the middle of a soggy field with nothing but the wind for company. And suddenly, nature decides it's your time. If you lived back then, where do you think you'd rather go? The cold, dark castle latrine or the open, windy field? Tell me in the comments. So, how did medieval folks manage the dirty business before the invention of toilet paper? What happened after the deed was done? Today, we're stepping into one of the least talked about, most uncomfortable, and, let's be honest, most fascinating aspects of life in the Middle Ages. How exactly did people clean themselves after pooping? Grab your toilet roll, brace your stomach, hold your nose, hit that like button, and let's venture into this rather smelly corner of history. First things first, the medieval concept of a bathroom looked nothing like ours. Private, cozy washrooms with scented candles and warm running water? Not a chance. This was hygiene stripped down to bare survival. Even the word lavatrina, which in Latin once meant a place to wash, felt like a cruel joke in most of medieval Europe. Bathing was rare, and clean was more a rumor than a reality. For nobles, castles had what were known as guardrobes, narrow little rooms jutting out from the castle wall, with a simple hole in the floor. Waste would plummet straight down, often into a moat or a reeking pit where it mixed with. Well, let's just say you wouldn't want to stand downwind. In winter, the cold air and the smell would rise back through that same hole like an uninvited guest. By the later Middle Ages, towns like London and Paris experimented with cesspits and primitive sewers. But cleaning them was another nightmare entirely. That unpleasant duty fell to the gong farmers, men who literally climbed into pits full of human waste. Many suffocated from the toxic fumes. Others caught lethal diseases. The work was so revolting that it was done only at night, when fewer eyes and noses were around to witness it. For peasants, things were far more rustic. Relief could be taken behind a tree, in a field, or even in the corner of a barn. Some villages had communal latrines, but without plumbing, waste piled up fast and foul. The result? Infections ran rampant, and children were especially at risk, with open cuts, weak immune systems, and no clean water to fight off disease. But the ordeal didn't end once the droppings hit the dirt. The real challenge came after. How do you wipe without toilet paper? Creativity became a survival skill. Peasants reached for whatever nature provided: straw, hay, dry grass, or carefully chosen leaves. Choose the wrong one, and you'd be itching for days. Moss was a forest favorite, soft, absorbent, and mercifully gentle. But sometimes there was nothing at all. And that's when the left hand came into play. Water, if available, was used to rinse afterward. That's why in some cultures even today, the left hand is considered unclean for eating or greeting. In coastal areas, sailors and fishermen took a more abrasive approach. Seashells. Yes, real shells. Just imagine one wrong angle, and you'd be walking funny for a week. In dry, treeless regions, people resorted to smooth sticks or even pottery shards, requiring precision best described as "don't mess this up." The wealthy had slightly more refined methods. Monks and nobles used reusable linen cloths, washed and used again. To mask lingering odors, They often packed perfumed herbs into their clothes, but without regular bathing. Even royalty carried a certain aroma. Long before medieval times, the Romans had been far more sophisticated. In their public toilets, they used a tersarium, a sponge tied to a stick, dipped in salt water or vinegar. It sounds almost civilized, until you remember it was shared. Everyone used the same sponge, rinsed it, and passed it on. After Rome's fall, that system vanished, and Europe stumbled backward into centuries of filth. For the poorest of the poor, even moss or straw could be a luxury. Some had to walk miles to find water for washing. In winter, they sometimes used snow, freezing, painful, and guaranteed to leave skin raw and cracked. If the only water source nearby was already polluted with waste, there was no choice but to stay dirty. And that dirt carried consequences: rashes, infections, epidemics. So, while knights fought bloody battles and kings waged wars for glory, the real enemy for most medieval people might just have been the humble trip to the loo. Dysentery, cholera, and parasitic worms didn't creep. They ripped through towns like an unrelenting wildfire. During the nightmare of the Black Death, many physicians swore by a strange belief that filth itself acted as a shield against disease. Their advice? Don't bathe, ever. The result was cities and villages steeped in the stench of decay, where the air reeked of rotting flesh and unwashed bodies. People clung to tiny cloth pouches filled with herbs, pressing them to their noses to mask the foul air, or to hide their own odor. In some churches, the smell was so overpowering that you could actually be turned away from attending services. Even the rowdiest taverns, places that welcomed drunken brawls in questionable hygiene, sometimes refused entry to the most offensive-smelling customers. Public latrines, especially in inns and larger towns, often had deep, festering waste pits that generated methane gas, highly flammable and dangerously unpredictable. If someone wandered in with a lit candle, well, medieval records don't shy away from the truth. There were actual cases of bathrooms exploding. Yes, in the Middle Ages, you could literally meet your end through a poop-related detonation. As for toilet paper, it's far younger than you think. Invented in 14th century China, it was viewed as pointless in Europe. By the 1400s, French nobles pampered themselves with soft, perfumed cloths, while in Germany and England, most still relied on moss, hay, or whatever nature provided. In monasteries, monks reused cloths much as the Romans had centuries before. Many people believed that contact with dirt and filth actually toughened the body, so they didn't exactly fight for cleanliness. Then came the printing press, and by the 1500s, old pamphlets, discarded manuscripts, and scrap paper were finding a second life in the privy. Yes, it's entirely possible that a page of Shakespeare once met a rather undignified fate. Toilet paper rolls didn't arrive in stores until the 1800s, and even then, most people scoffed at the idea of paying for paper when newspapers, catalogs, and even corn cobs were free. It wasn't until the 20th century that toilet paper became an everyday staple, closing one of the longest, smelliest chapters in human history. But here's the twist. Centuries before Europe even considered it, early Muslims had already mastered the art of hygiene. And no, they weren't fumbling with leaves or scraping with stones. They were using water. Why? Because in Islam, cleanliness isn't just a good habit, it's a divine command. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught that purity, tahara, is half of faith. This wasn't a poetic flourish. It was a daily practice. For Muslims, relieving oneself didn't end with wiping. It was followed by thorough cleansing with water, an act of physical hygiene and spiritual preparation for prayer, performed 5 times a day. It wasn't just religious, it was profoundly practical. While medieval Europe dumped chamber pots into the streets and bathed rarely, cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba built public bathhouses, advanced sewage systems, and encouraged washing the hands, face, and body multiple times daily. Islamic hygiene laws were centuries ahead of their time. And here's the thing. Muslims didn't reject toilet paper when it appeared. They simply preferred water because it worked better. Even today, bidets and handheld sprayers are as common in Muslim homes as kitchen sinks, spanning from Jakarta to Istanbul. Modern science has only just caught up, with doctors now agreeing that water cleans more thoroughly, more gently, and more hygienically than dry wiping alone. So, the next time someone asks, why don't Muslims just use toilet paper? The answer is simple. They were ahead of the game by hundreds of years. And speaking of the past, public latrines in the Middle Ages were the opposite of private. Imagine long wooden benches with perfectly spaced holes, strangers shoulder to shoulder, holding casual conversation while you handled your business. No partitions, no modesty, no escape. So, fellow time travelers, what do we take from all this? That in some eras, wiping your behind was practically an extreme sport. That the humble roll of toilet paper we take for granted today was once an unimaginable luxury. Before that, people made do with moss, hay, snow, sticks, anything they could find. Add in the occasional exploding privy, and bathroom emergencies take on a whole new meaning. From herb-scented deodorants to questionable bathing habits, the history of hygiene has been anything but clean. So tell me, if you had to live in a medieval town for a month, what would you miss more? Privacy in the bathroom or modern plumbing? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you love exploring the gritty, bizarre, and downright unexpected corners of history, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Vassal Truths. Because here, we dig into the past without rose-colored glasses, just the raw, weird, and wonderfully human truths that shape the world. Stick around. The next story might make you grateful for every flush.